Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Wonderlust Wealth Show. Today, we have a dear friend of mine, Marcie Banks. She is a fabulous real estate developer and designer who's built and renovated 18 homes for rental or for resale in the New Orleans area. And not just that, but in addition to her projects, Marcie consults with other homeowners and developers as a designer and an owner's representative. And guys, like, the projects she does are absolutely beautiful. I have seen so many of them and I am obsessed. Welcome to the show, Marcie.
Hey, good to see you, Olivia.
So good to see you too. Well, Marcie, I know you, but why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners? Who is Marcie and who were you before the real estate investing, before the business, before the entrepreneurship, all of that?
I'm Marcie, and as Olivia said, I've been working on designing and developing and flipping houses in New Orleans for the past about 6 or 7 years. I'm at about 18, I think, right now, although maybe a few more since I last counted. And I actually went to architecture school. So I always wanted to be an architect when I was growing up as a little kid, like as long as I could remember. I went to architecture school at Tulane, and I did the traditional architecture firm path for a few years after college and worked for some really great firms in New Orleans and in Texas for a couple of years. And randomly, life took a turn, and I ended up owning a jewelry company for about 8 to 10 years. I was designing jewelry for fun, and then that took off. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to jump. And so I jumped out of architecture, working in the traditional sense, and did jewelry design for about 8 to 10 years. And as life happened, I ended up making another switch about 7 years ago back into development and architecture.
I love that. And also, I think especially, at least when I was growing up, everyone kind of pressured you to figure out exactly what you're going to do. Like right out of college, you were on a track and following one path for the rest of your life. And I don't know about you, but I know for me that never, ever really resonated.
No.
Like life is
next to me, actually. Like if somebody said, even if it was the most perfect day ever, this day, every day for the rest of your life, like I cannot. That is not how I work.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Feel that so hard. So I guess tell me a little bit, like, why did you go into architecture and what were some of the experiences that you had that kind of led to you then having a jewelry store?
So I've always loved houses, and I grew up, we moved around a lot growing up, and we built a couple houses. My parents had bought spec homes, and so we were part of the process of them being built. My dad would bring me to job sites. We would go to Home Depot every weekend. Like that, I'm like nostalgic going to Home Depot. And I like to bring my daughter now with me. I just kind of grew up around it. My dad built the decks and kind of was always working on the house. And I always loved architecture. It was like kind of a no-brainer that I was definitely going to do that. So that's how I kind of got into it. And jewelry. Okay, this is how jewelry happened. So when you are in architecture school, you're super creative and you're designing things and you have studio and your brain and your creative juices are flowing all the time. When you join an architecture firm right out of college, well, clearly they're not letting the 22-year-old design a building. So they give you like exit stair details, and you're really just doing picking up red lines and like learning all the technical stuff, which is incredibly important. But as someone who is a creative and went into this line of work to be creative, it's hard to really scratch that itch when you're just starting out in architecture. And so I started designing jewelry literally as a creative outlet because I'm a creative and I have to make things. And as the architecture twist, of course, I designed it using AutoCAD, and I had my design laser cut using a laser cutter, which was when I was in college, laser cutters and 3D modeling was like just coming out. And so I loved the technology and I loved using architecture skills to design things. And so I just started making things just as an outlet. And then I was like, well, let me just put it on Etsy and see if it sells. Well, I did. And I think the first thing I put up sold within a few hours. And I was like, wait, what?
Like people will buy this?
I was like, okay, so something I love, I can be creative and put it in the world. Etsy was kind of just taking off, so it wasn't super saturated. I think part of my success had to do with just the timing of everything, which isn't that the truth about everything. So I started doing the jewelry, and within about 6 months, I was making more money doing that than my architecture job. So I said, let's give it a shot.
Wait, excuse me? Within 6 months, you were making more money doing that than in your architecture job. That is wild.
Well,
that is so wild.
Yeah. Well, also a testament to people just starting out in architecture don't make a ton of money, but it's the labor of love for many years. And so it was really just, I think also my father's an entrepreneur, so it was in my blood to say, okay, you know what, I'm just going to see. And so that led me to about 8 years of just doing that full time.
Yeah. Also, it really does blow my mind because college is a crazy place because for most people, what you learn in college is not what you're actually going to do in the real world.
Correct.
In
That's
any
totally
way,
true.
shape, or form. And I'm like, there has to be some sort of correction around that in the future, because why are we going to college if we're literally not doing the thing?
It's true.
Oh,
it's true. You learn everything with real world experience, and that's been my experience as well. What did I know about the jewelry industry or how to make jewelry? But you just figure it out like you do anything else.
Completely.
So, yeah.
Well, and that's like, so, for the longest time, so I got my master's in engineering and technology management, which is basically like a mini MBA, but around like engineering in particular. And my parents for the longest time were like, you should really go and get your MBA. And I just don't understand the point because I know for sure, just by me having built my business over the last few years, I've learned so much more about business, about entrepreneurship, how to actually build a business, marketing, sales, all of that from actually building my business than I would have going to school about it,
100%. And I look at it, I'm lucky to have a lot of entrepreneurs in my family and in my close friends. And I actually sometimes feel like this super, I don't want to say like people coming out of that environment where they went and got an MBA or they worked only in corporate and they learn like very specific prescribed ways to do things, that I almost feel like it could be a detriment to when you're like the scrappy young startup, because you have to be thinking on your feet all the time and ready to pivot. And if you have this really ingrained way of thinking about business and how to do things, I think you kind of get in your own way a little bit. I'm constantly talking to my sister about her company and about how they do things very differently in a lot of ways, but they've been successful because of it, because they're not ingrained in this one way of doing things. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably not an accident that most entrepreneurs do not have MBAs, I would guess.
Yeah. No, completely. Okay, well, so you built this amazing jewelry company. How did you then transition into being a real estate developer?
So it was something that getting back into real estate and design was always a love and passion of mine. And my husband and I, we renovated our own home, our very first house. We did a lot of DIY, which I don't really do anymore at all. And we learned about how to do everything on that house. And around that time, we decided to have a child. So I got pregnant with my daughter. And I realized that something about becoming a mother for me crystallized, okay, what am I doing? Like, what does this next chapter look like? And for me, I said, it's time. This other dream I've had, there's no time like the present time to look at that. So I sold my jewelry company. I gave it to my best friend. So it still lives on, and she loves it. And so she's still running it. I didn't want to just close it down. It's a great company. But we sold our very first house, my husband and I, and we took the profits, and we decided, my husband's amazing, and he was like, let's use most of the profits from the sale of our very first house on your first flip. And so when we went and bought our next house, we put down like the minimum amount that we had to put down so that we were able to preserve a lot of that nest egg from the profits from our first house. And we used that on our first flip.
That is so exciting. Yeah. So exciting. So where was this first flip? And also, a lot of people who are really intimidated by flipping because a lot of things can go wrong. And I know so many people whose margins are so thin on flips where it can be really nerve-wracking. So how did you decide what your first flip was going to be, where it was going to be, what that was going to look like, and kind of like what was your buy box and criteria for that first flip?
When I went to architecture school, my passion was historic preservation. I actually have a certificate of historic preservation, kind of like a minor in architecture school. So I thought that I wanted to just do historic renovations and flip. And so we found I think it was $42,000. It was this Creole cottage in Algiers Point in New Orleans. And you couldn't even recognize it as a Creole cottage anymore. It had been so altered, but I could see the form of it. And I was like, this is a special property. Everybody told us to tear it down, but we were like, no, we're going to do it. So it was a $42,000 for the house, and it had it was a double lot. So it had a vacant lot next to it. So it was me. I had another business partner, one of my best friends at the time. We both kind of jumped in together on this, and we bought the house and the lot next door. We hired, we're learning, right? So we don't know what we're doing. We're just going in. So we hire an architect to help us, because I'm not a licensed architect. I never got licensed, which is a story for another day. So I can't stamp drawings, but it's also good. I have to collaborate with other local architects. So we hire an architect, we hire a GC, and then we renovate and put back together this amazing Creole cottage. Well, we ended up losing money on that project. Not a ton. I think we lost like $6,000. So it wasn't like it was the worst experience ever. But at the end of it, we essentially ended up with a free lot, the lot next door. So at that point, my friend and business partner had just had her first child and was like, I'm going to take a step back from this. And so I bought her out of her share of the lot. And then I said, I had never intended to get into new construction when I set out. But I said, well, it's got a vacant lot. I might as well build on it. So same process. I found another GC that was going to build faster and that was better suited for new construction. And we just did it and went for it. And I made some money on that one. So I said, so from there, I kind of pivoted a lot to new construction because you don't have as many unknowns. You're not going to open a wall and realize that you have termite damage and you need a new sewer system and all of that. When you have new construction, you know off the bat the cost of everything, and you have very little change orders. And so that's kind of how I ended up kind of going. Is it scary? It is, but if you have a really good real estate agent and you know your numbers, it's just like anything else.
Yeah. No, that is so fair. And it's so funny because I love historic renovations. I think they're beautiful, so stunning, but I cannot get away from the fact that I just see dollar signs right away, right off the bat. Yeah. I'm just like, we have no idea what is behind those walls, what could be happening. And, for a lot of the time too, with those historic renovations, it's like the permitting and everything that you need to get in order to fix things. My brain's just like, I don't know if I can do that. But the part of why I love new construction too is you can standardize most of it, but then you can still make it fun and different and change the fixtures and change this up. So you kind of have a little bit more wiggle room, and it's easier for builders too, right?
You can build it faster. Also, it's better in New Orleans. We're hurt by insurance rates a lot. So homeowners get way better insurance rates on new construction. So from a flipping standpoint, being able to provide like new construction for somebody is also just a better investment because you're going to get better returns on that because the homeowner can afford to pay a little bit more for that house because their insurance rates are going to be a lot less. Just renovations, especially in New Orleans, like these houses that you're touching are minimum 100 years old, typically much older than that, 150 years old. And you have to be ready to spend some money. I mean, you can't open a wall and see a termite-eaten stud and just close the wall back up. You got to go chase that. You have to chase that down. I mean, I'm also a perfectionist. So if I see something, I have to take care of it. And you really start having to chase down that damage. And you could be rebuilding the entire house before you know it. So margins on renovation, those would have to be, you'd have to go into it knowing you have plenty of money, assuming something is going to go wrong. And if it doesn't, great. But you have to cover your bases on that.
Yeah, completely. I love that. And so, I think so. I believe I met you kind of during the pandemic, like early on during the pandemic.
That sounds right.
I think. And I remember you were building at that time, right when people told you not to be building.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Tell me a little bit about your mentality during that time period and how you kind of just went for it.
So we were we had a house in Beaufort, South Carolina that was a short-term rental actually. And we said, let's just go there for 2 weeks, when we all thought we were only shut down for 2 weeks. I was under contract on a lot over there, actually over in kind of where your house in New Orleans is, over in that neighborhood. And I remember calling my banker, who was amazing. He's great. And then calling my builder and saying, am I crazy? And both of them said, maybe. I mean, I had my banker, because I love calling my banker. He's an amazing resource because he knows what all the other, he had this pulse because he's loaning to people all over the city. And he'll call me every once in a while and start call everyone he works with and kind of say, how are you feeling about things? So when I call him, he said, I've got people who are stopping everything and I've got people who are still going. And I called my builder and he said, most people are going to stop. And if we keep going, there won't be any competition on the other side of this because people will have stopped building. And so I said, all right, I'm just going to go. And it was scary, but we all know what happened. It ended up working out. So we just kept going.
Yeah, that's like, there's that one famous quote, which I'm for sure going to butcher, but it's like, when people are fearful, dive right in. I don't know, whatever the quote is. But, it's kind of like right now, even with the interest rates, right? So many people are waiting for interest rates to come down so that they can buy a property. But people don't realize is there's so much opportunity right now. There really is. And don't get me wrong, it is scary, especially I've got 7.85% interest rates on a couple of my properties, right? You're just like, are these interest rates going to come down? Will I be able to refinance? But the people who in 5 years, 10 years are like, wow, I was so smart for investing in real estate during that time when interest rates were really high. Like, that's when other people are going to be like, wow, like, must be really nice. I should have invested back then during that time, And it's realizing, yeah.
Yeah. Think about like 2008, right? Like, remember the housing prices after that? I mean, I look at that and I'm like, can you imagine if I had bought? I mean, there were houses like in the best part of New Orleans going for like $200,000. I mean, those are $600,000 properties now. So imagine if you made that decision.
Yeah. Just insanity. Oh my gosh. So I guess tell me a little bit, because I know even through COVID and through the pandemic, there was so much uncertainty. So for a while there, you even went back and got a corporate job, a more corporate job, right? And then now you've kind of gone back to full-time entrepreneurship. So can you tell me a little bit about that transition you had and like what was kind of going through your mind, the things that you learned during that period of time as well?
Gosh, man, the past 3 years have been quite a learning process. So came through 2020, obviously everything was selling crazy. I couldn't even keep things on, things were selling before we even finished construction. That was great. So then around, I believe it was 2022 when the interest rate, and it was like when, you remember this, Olivia, when it was like the sky is falling. It wasn't just interest rates are going up. It was like the world is ending, the economy is going to collapse, and everything stopped. At least in New Orleans, I think there's some markets that didn't get affected quite as much, but certainly in New Orleans, everything ground to a screeching halt, especially the lower price points. New Orleans speak, like under $500,000 were kind of is really a first-time homebuyer price point for the New Orleans market. Though it makes perfect sense. They couldn't, if your budget's under $500,000 and your interest rate spikes 2% and what you were expecting, and let's say that contributes another $500 a month in your expense. I mean, for someone at that price point, that makes or breaks a deal.
Yeah.
But what we found is that the higher price points, like $1 million and above, they are more able to like weather those storms a little bit better than the lower price points. But so 2022, the crazy interest rate situation, sky falling, all of that hits. And I've got, I guess, 3 houses on the market at that point, and they're not selling. This is a new experience for me. I am super stressed out and scared and all of, all of that stuff that is, that we battle every day, all the fear and all that. But we hang on through. Eventually those do sell and we kind of get out of that. Luckily we get out without losing anything. We end up kind of breaking even, but you know what? A lot of people did much worse during that. Yeah. So I came out of that and I think it was like one of those transition times where I was again, like, is this really, am I doing this? Like, is this really it? That didn't feel very good to not make money, work really hard and not make money for about a year. And so around that time, I was also, I had some business partners on some projects, but I was for the most part, working alone. I mean, I would hire a GC and obviously would work with my bankers, and I was collaborating, but I was the engine for all of this happening. And I kind of got burnt out on working alone. And so a couple of those things. So the market being weird, I'm getting a little concerned about relying on this for my income. And I'm like getting burnt out working by myself all the time. And so I had a moment where I was like, what if I did go back and work for other people? What would that even look like? What would be a job that would get me really excited? And so I actually found a luxury short-term rental developer that's based out of New Orleans who had just moved their headquarters here. And I was like, well, that sounds really amazing. They're building luxury short-term rentals. And the team that they have is incredible. Like their resumes are so cool. Like what they're doing is amazing. And so with like my first resume I had put together in 15 years. And I was like, I don't even know. Like I had no idea if they would look at it and be like, who is this person? Like they haven't had a job in, haven't had like a W2 job in 15 years. So I interviewed for that and they offered me a job. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the thought process for getting back in. It was me just kind of pivoting and kind of seeing how that felt and how that path was going to take me.
Okay, y'all, do I have something exciting for you? Now, I just came out with a brand new free training on exactly how you can get started investing in real estate within the next 3 months. Because if you're someone who wants more freedom in your life, the ability to travel the world and do the things that you actually want to do in life, you're going to want to listen up. Trust me. Now, this training is freaking awesome. I literally go in and spill the tea on the number one strategy that is working right now, like literally today in today's market. And I go over how to look at deals and make sure that they actually cash flow and how to set your properties up so that you can run them from anywhere in the world. Like I literally have managed my properties from over 6 different time zones. So if you are stuck in analysis paralysis, you don't know where to start when it comes to real estate investing, but you know that it's something that you want to do in the future, this training is going to be for you. So to check it out, click the link in the show notes or DM me the word hack, like HACK on Instagram, and I will send you the link. Now let's dive back into the show. Yeah. No, and that's so true too. And I like how the mindset was, what if I found something where I could work for someone else or whatever that would feel okay, like that would feel right. Because I know for me, for example, when I was in corporate America, could I have potentially found another job that I was less miserable in? Yeah, maybe, honestly, potentially. But for whatever reason, the universe led, which I'm so thankful it did because I know I'm in the right place now. But like, for some people, you don't have to go full-time entrepreneurship and take on that responsibility, because I will say, like, being a business owner and being a full-time entrepreneur is a lot of work, and all the responsibility is on your shoulders. And when things go wrong for you. And especially if people working for you, you are kind of like responsible for their livelihood. That being said, if you are excited and ready to take on that responsibility and know that there's so much more out there for you, it's an incredible, I would even say, personal development path in life.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So then now, a few years later, you tried out working for someone else for a while. What made you switch back into full-time entrepreneurship?
So I never was really able to fully give up my project. So I still at the same time had my development projects going on the side, had some design projects going on the side, and some other consulting things. And so now I'm working a 40-hour work week for somebody. And then at nights and weekends, I'm working on these other things, because I guess this reminds me of when I was in architecture and I was doing my jewelry company. Like, there's something about me that I just have to have my own thing going. I'm not able to fully give up my own thing to go. I mean, this makes it sound bad, but like to go build someone else's dream.
Same.
I
completely. I get what you mean.
And I have the utmost like love and respect for the people that I worked for and what they created. And like, if there's going to be a dream, I want to help build it with theirs. I mean, it was really wonderful, but I just wasn't able to stop to give up my own dream. And that's probably also, it's just me, me and how I was raised and how my brain worked. So here I am working a 9 to 5. Also, like, I'm a little I'm a perfectionist and I'm kind of intense and I am giving that my all. When I'm at that office, I am like giving that my all. And then I'm leaving at the end of the day and I have these other projects. And of course I have a 4-year-old daughter. So I'm essentially burned myself out.
Yeah.
And then it was a process of a few months, but I realized that it wasn't sustainable. And of course I went back to, I guess, the transition of how I made the decision to go into development, where I was like, okay, what does this look like long term? And then once I had figured out it wasn't going to work for me to do it that way, to work a full-time job and keep my own passions alive, that wasn't tenable. It was like, at that point, it was just a matter of like, okay, what's my next plan? And so I believe I had breakfast with you and you were like, Marcie, you know what you have to do. Basically, just like, tell me when you've done it.
I know, it's so funny. I feel like I was, I'd come back into town once every couple of months or whatever, and I'd be like, so have you left yet?
Yeah, you just knew, like, you could see right through it. And it's like, what's so funny is that when I was in it, and like I said, I am a person that gets like fully invested in what I committed to. So it's almost like I had all this fear about leaving it. I felt I had a big team I was managing a team of 7. And I felt like I didn't want to abandon them. Like I cared a lot about my team. I cared about the company. I cared about people I worked with. I didn't want to let the people, the CEO, down about leaving. And I had all this fear about like, what does this mean? Like, what am I going to do? Like, am I just going to go back to just development? Am I going to try to do something else? Like, I still want to work with people. And so I had made it this big thing, this big scary thing. And ultimately within a month of leaving, like, I don't know why I was worried. Of course it's fine. Of course it's totally fine.
And it's like, they're going to find a replacement. They're going to be fully 100% okay. You're going to be fully 100% okay. But yeah, it's so funny because even when I left Chevron, I was just like, wow, I'm just, so involved in the team and everything. What are they going to do? And it was so funny too, because even a couple of months after I left, I did have some folks on the offshore oil and gas platform call my personal phone. And they were like, hey, I know we're not supposed to be calling you, but we just wanted to know this. And I kind of, had a sense of importance. I was like, you say you need me, But I realized like that was just all of that fear around leaving and disappointing people was around my ego. Because at the end of the day, they're running a business just like we are now. And it's like, you have to make decisions for the business. Yeah. If there was something happening, like let's say they were having layoffs, I probably would have been laid off, like if that was happening during that time. Because I've been through so many layoff cycles with the company before. And it's knowing that your identity is not based off of your job. Like you can go and do whatever the heck you want and live the life that you want. And that is really what's going to like give you long-term fulfillment, not just like feeling important in your job, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. And I think also for me personally, like I always kept reminding myself, I always have this moment, and not to be all squishy about it, but like,
no, I love this
after my daughter goes to bed at night, most nights, I'm ashamed to say, before I go to bed, she's asleep, I'll sneak back in her room and check on her, kiss her head while she's asleep. And I'll always have this moment where I'm like walking out of her room and I'm like, that's what matters. And I like, it's this gut check for me every day to remember that like your family, your friends, being present in your life, like that is the point of everything, right? And just not, playing Candyland with her where I'm thinking about work. Well, no, I should be present with my family and my friends. So at the end of the day, like, I don't think anyone at the end of their life is like, man, I wish I'd responded to that email faster. They're thinking like, I wish I'd been more present on these, like with these people and having these experiences and making these memories, which all about. I mean, that's what you've built your whole thing. Like be present in your life, enjoy your life. And, you got to find a way to do both.
100%. I love that. So I'm going to get a little bit more technical now, just because I know that there are other people out here who are like, I really want to do new construction, or I really want to be a developer. Like that's something I really want to do. What is some, like anyone who's thinking of getting into the field, what is some either advice or some beginner steps that you could recommend to them?
So I get this question a lot. And so I always say, Number one, you have to find a great realtor, a great real estate agent, like the best, who will be able to guide you, to help you evaluate properties that you see, to tell you everything you need to know about comp and what's selling and who the buyer is, whether it's a family, whether it's a single person, whether it's a second home buyer. You really need someone who can give you that information, because unless you have access to the MLS and comp and you've been in the business, I don't think that you can discount the value of their perspective. So number one is to find like an excellent real estate agent and make like who knows their shit. Number two is to figure out the money. So I always say call a lender. So in New Orleans, I always have a couple names that I always give out to people who ask, and it's like, that they're the people who are they can look at your numbers, they can look at your tax returns and what you have, and they'll guide you on, what we can loan to you, what the terms are going to be, what you're really looking at. For me, I've always used commercial lending. Olivia and I were talking about this earlier, that a lot of people use private money, and to be totally honest, that is a world that I don't really know much about. But for me, I use commercial lending. So the interest usually the down payments are between 20 and 30%, depending on the lender and on the relationship and the size of the bank. And so let's say you've got a lot that's $100,000 and you want to build something that's $300,000. So the total project cost was $400,000. So you, at a 20% down, you need to have $80,000 in cash available to do the project. Plus, so is a percentage on top of that where you need to be liquid to pay for architecture, pay for permitting, and pay for the things before your first draw kicks in. So lender, real estate agent, those are the two things. Oh, of course, obviously, the contractor. A good relationship with a really good contractor. Go to the job site, talk to the task customer. Did they build for other developers? If that's even better, then they understand that time is money. They understand, all those things. So once you kind of start building that network, then that would be the first step that I would have anyone do.
Yeah. So I guess how did you find your contractor, and if you're working with any others? Because, and that's something I always talk to my students about is, if you're going to do renovations, you got to make sure you find a good contractor, because that will literally make or break a project.
Yeah, because your project could be 3 months or 9 months or a year, and interest rates what they are, that could kill a project. For me, the first contractor I used took forever, and he did a beautiful job, but he just wasn't the right fit. The one who did the Krill Cottage, actually, I found the next contractor, and then the one I've been using ever since. Because he was building a spec home in my neighborhood, and I kept driving by, and I was like, well, that looks really nice and it's going up really fast. So I literally just called. So there's no shame in that. Drive around, find other spec homes or other houses that look about what you're looking at, and just start calling, meet them, talk to them, ask them questions about average length of time for their build. Do they work with other developers? That's even better.
Yeah. And so what are some protocols that you put in place when working with contractors to make sure that you are doing things correctly, or that they're doing things correctly, and that they're doing things on time as well?
So in the contract, you should always have a clause about that there's a penalty so if you agree on a 9-month construction term, that will get fined for every day after 9 months. So that's really typical, and a GC who won't commit to that, I would be a little leery of. These can be fair to both of them. Sometimes you'll have that where there's a penalty if they go over, but they say, but hey, if we're ahead of schedule, we want a bonus. There's ways to build that in where there's an incentive for them, maybe to start to finish quickly, and there's a penalty for them to take too long. So that's one. Also, you got to be on it with I do weekly walks with the project managers for my project. Every week, Tuesday at 9 a.m., we are walking that project. So we're catching things. Of course, make sure they're pulling all the right permit, which they have to if they're licensed. And then you could always hire a owner's representative that will represent you, someone who knows a lot about construction that can represent your interest and do those walks for you and know the questions to ask and what to look for.
Cough, cough, hire Marcie, cough, cough. I love it. And so, and I like to ask this question because I do think understanding the numbers just helps people see what the opportunities are. So like, what kind of profit margins are you finding on some of your flips? And I know you kind of have a whole different range because you've worked on both projects in the like $300,000 range and you've worked on $1 million projects. So like, what kind of profit margins do you see on a flip?
So there's two ways of calculating it that I have used. So one is a rate of return on investment. So that you take the full project cost and you say so let's say the lot of 100, the house is 300 to build. So I'm going to spend $400,000 on this project. And you figure out what your buy box is for what return you want on that full project cost, the ROI. So for me, I don't look at things less than 15%. So if I invest $400,000 on the project, and actually there's more stuff, like I'll factor in interest, because it's crazy now. That used to not be a really big factor. Now it's a huge factor in if a project goes or not. Architecture fees, permitting fees, you got to get all your total project costs together. And I'll say, I have to make 15% minimum off this. So if the all in it was 400, what is that? 60,000 I have to make on that. I would have to make to hit that 15% ROI. And if it's not going to hit that, I don't get emotional about it. If I make an offer and I say, I can't go over this number, I'm not going to get my ROI, and they go $1,000 over it, I will say no. You have to hold your feet. You have to just hold the line. So that's one way of doing things. Another way is you can think about it as a cash on cash return, which is how I used to factor everything, which is basically saying, if I have $400,000 project and I'm getting a 20% down payment on it, and so I'm going to have to come up with $80,000 in cash, what percentage do I want to make on that cash?
Yeah.
And so for a while, my number was 60%. So if I invested 80,000, I wanted to make back 60%, which was quick math. What's 60% of 80 grand?
Like 4,800. I mean, 48,000. Yes.
Yeah. So I would be like, okay, I need to be able to make 48,000. And that's a good calculation, because you got to think that $80,000, what would you be making in the stock market? 8% or whatever. So that's a much better return. So those are the two ways that I calculate it. Some people will go for a lower ROI. Some people have a higher ROI. It's really just a matter of what you want. Basically.
Well, and that's also a pretty solid salary. like if you do two of those a year, you're at almost 100K,
Yeah, great.
Whereas something that's a lot more fun for a lot of people than working whatever job they were working right now. So just something to think about there too.
Well, more risk, of course. So like if it doesn't sell, you have to think, it's always good on the other side to think, okay, if I had to carry this mortgage because it doesn't sell, can I rent it out for that amount of money? Would I have to come out of pocket? Would it cash flow? I haven't always thought like that, but after the 2022 craziness, I do always try to think about, okay, what's worst case scenario here? And the good thing about investing in real estate is like, it's still a house somebody can live in. Mm-hmm. It's not like you're investing in a patent that someone may or may not make money off of. You're investing in a thing that's like a basic need, shelter for people. So it feels a little bit safer.
Totally. And that's like, even with my place in New Orleans, like everyone's always afraid to invest either in New Orleans or in cities in general, like for short-term rentals because of regulations and stuff like that. I'm like, that is so fair. Do not put all of your eggs in one basket and be like, this only works as a short-term rental. Perfect. I just cannot get behind that personally. But for example, when I bought my duplex, I was like, okay, even if I have to long-term rent out both sides, does it at least break even? And I'm going to be okay and can afford the mortgage regardless? Yes. Cool. Let's do it. So you always want to be thinking about those exit strategies. And a lot of people don't think about them until they go through something like a recession or like COVID or 2008 regulations, all of it. So just always have that at the back of your mind. I will say, for anyone that is just getting started though, sometimes you do have to just trust your gut and take the risk and do it just to get in and build that confidence.
Right. I mean, starting with your own property is a great idea too. Like you did, you bought your first double, right? And so a lot of friends I have in it started that way as well, to say, okay, I might flip this, but it can be mine. I know other developers who've done that in the past where they had something that wasn't selling and they said, you know what, I'm going to move in and I'm going to sell my house.
Yeah.
And it's just, you have to kind of like, that's the life. You just got to be comfortable with that.
So true. Oh my goodness. Okay. So right now, you're doing renovations and you're building and you're consulting. Like, where do you see yourself? And I know this is a loaded question and I know we're figuring out, but what is something that like in your lifetime you want to have done?
Okay. You're going to love this, Olivia.
Okay.
Micro resort, I'm like obsessed with.
Yes.
So it's actually my sister and I have been talking about it for a long time, but our goal and plan is eventually we want to buy a bunch of land in Maine where we love to be and build basically a little micro resort up there. So that has to happen. It's going to happen. But I have some ideas about doing them in various locations and having them be based. This idea that they'll be based on the vernacular of the local architecture. So if it was in Louisiana, they might be tiny trail cottages. If it's in Maine, there might be tiny salt box cottages where they're like little tiny houses. But like not, I do love a modern Scandinavian design. That's awesome too. But I have this idea of this vision of them being kind of in different places, but being really informed by the local architecture.
I love that. So I guess this is a little bit not necessarily a coaching question, but what's stopping you right now?
Actually, we're in the money. I mean, my sister and I, we're going to have a little summit. And she is a native plant nerd. She's obsessed with native plants and her forever plan is to be have like a native plant. We're basically going to use this for people to go there that are interested in native plants, interested in gardening, and she can kind of turn it into like an educational experience as well. Or for people like me who just like pretty flowers, that sounds great, wonderful, like an organic gardens and stuff. So we're actually planning a summit to sort of finally like, let's put numbers down. Okay, how much land do we need? How much acreage do we need? Where do we want it to be? How far is it from an airport? How much, let's talk to a lender. What do we need? How are we going to do the LLC? It's family, so you got to be careful. How are we going to do that? So yeah, really at this point, it's just sit down, put numbers down and start making it real.
I think
one of our ideas was we could buy the land and just have glamping site until we can have the money to develop it. Yep. So that's another idea that we're kind of working on right now.
Oh my gosh, we have so much to talk about.
I know.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Well, Marcie, we are about approaching the end of the interview, but I'm going to ask you the 3 final interview questions that I ask every single person who comes on the show. Number 1, what does your ideal perfect day look like? And it's so funny because we mentioned earlier about your perfect day and how even your perfect day, you wouldn't want to do every single day, which is so freaking true. And it's so funny because everyone's perfect day also evolves as they start doing different things and go through life. But right now, what does your ideal perfect day look like?
So my perfect day right now would be to wake up with my daughter, like naturally, spend time with her, bring her to school, go work out, go from a workout to site visit because I love construction zones, come home, have usually lunch, take a shower, get, around lunchtime, and then spend a few hours doing like design and emails and work stuff, and then wrap up my day by like 3 or 4. That would be ideal.
Perfect. Literally perfect.
Travel as much as possible and just be present. Just be present in my life.
Yeah, I love that. Question number 2. What is your mantra?
If not now, when?
I love that.
Is that a mantra or is that just true. Like a saying? Is that a mantra? Is that just
I would say that's a mantra because, but that's essentially what a mantra is, right? It's a way of life. It's like, what do you tell yourself over and over and over again that keeps you going and keeps you motivated? And if not now, then when? Because it's so true, because life is so short and our days on this earth are numbered, okay? So when else are you going to do it?
Crystallize, like maybe you don't want it as bad as you thought you wanted. This thing that you built up in your head and you go, well, actually, when? Well, not now, and maybe not later, and maybe not at all. And then you just let it go.
Yeah. So true. So because at the end of the day, like if you really want something to happen, if you actually in your soul, in your core want something to happen, you're going to make it happen.
Yeah,
You will.
I agree with you.
And every day that you say, like, maybe later, what you're essentially saying is it doesn't actually matter. And it's not something that you're prioritizing, which is totally fine.
Yeah, and let it go. Make space for something else then. I 100% agree with you. Yeah.
So true. Okay, last question. What does wealth mean to you?
Freedom. So it is the freedom to be, honestly, I keep saying this, it's the freedom to be present in your life, to make choices in your life. And it's not even, I love to work. I have no fantasies about retiring. It's not
Me
even.
neither. Oh my God.
Yeah, my husband does. He can't wait. I am like, I don't think I'll ever retire. What? No, it's not about wealth to not work. It's about wealth to have the freedom to be present in your life.
Yeah. And do the things that you want to do at the end of the day. I'm the same where I enjoy working. I've had periods of time where I had nothing to do and it drove me absolutely insane.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
Like, I need a project. I need to be working on something. But then I am also the kind of person to just dip out for a month and be like, see ya.
The freedom of it. So it's like, so for me, it's that. It's the freedom to choose, to be present, to make a choice of how you want your day to go. It's not an escape. It's really the opposite of escape almost.
Yeah. So true. Well, I love this so much. And I'm so excited for you, Marcie. What's the best place? Like, if anyone ever wanted to reach out to you, learn a little bit more about, development, or even learn more about investing in New Orleans, like, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
So I'm pretty active on Instagram. I'm Gray Revival Properties with EY, Gray Revival. Or I think you can just email me at hello@Gray Revival Properties. And I love chatting with people. And as Olivia knows, I'm really open. I don't do gatekeeping. I love chatting with other people, and I'm like an open book. So
yes, I love it. And you've even created a wonderful women's real estate investing group in New Orleans, which is so cool. And I'm so excited. I'm like, when I leave, really, we couldn't have been doing this before. And
we still made it happen when you were still here. I know.
It's okay. Right. I think I'm coming back at some point in December or January, at least for a couple of weeks. So
we'll make it happen. Maybe you can talk to us about house hacking. That would be great.
Yes, I would love to. Bread and butter. Love. Thank you so much, Marcie. This was wonderful.
It was good to see you.
Thank you so much for listening to Wonderlust Wealth Show. Now, don't forget to follow the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you love this episode, it would literally mean the world to me if you shared this with a friend or a family member, or literally like anyone off of the street. Like right now, go ahead, share it so you don't forget, or post it on social media and make sure to tag me. I love seeing what you're listening in on and what you resonated with, and I'm just so freaking thankful for you. I'm so freaking excited for you. I love you, and don't forget, life really doesn't have to be hard.